From the first moment I went into a formation, I was completely inspired. I had no doubts in my mind that we were dealing with something completely other, something completely extraordinary.
And I remember the first time I saw one. I remember the sense of witnessing something that was totally impossible.
And people would come up and say that watches had stopped and cameras wouldn't work inside the circle.
Don't know where they come from and don't even care, whether from Earth or maybe from air. They might live on spacecraft that's driving somewhere.
We have here something both spiritual and physical which has the power to transform. It has the power to transform all of us as individuals, and it has the power to transform the world if we would just let it.
I first heard of crop circles in the late 1980s, when a friend showed me photos of strange patterns appearing in crop fields in southern England. I was immediately intrigued, and I just knew something beyond the beyond was going on. For a few years, I read reports, looked at photos, and hosted circle researchers in my Los Angeles home, where people concerned about the future frequently give presentations. Everyone found it astonishing that these complicated works of art, sometimes as big as 2 football fields, were turning up in crop fields overnight. In fact, eyewitnesses say the patterns take only seconds to go down. Many who visit the circles are deeply affected, convinced that no human beings could be responsible for these creations. So then, what is? And why? In 1993, I made my first trip to England to experience the circles for myself. I was taken by the loveliness of its picturesque towns, its ancient ruins, and its pastoral countryside. And here, in fields of canola, barley, and wheat, which the English call corn, no matter what the grain, I found what I had come for. I was so enthralled by the mystery of the circles that I've returned to England many times and have become part of the community of far-sighted artists, philosophers, writers, mathematicians, and assorted mavericks who are as fascinated as I am by what's going on. Wandering around with cameras in hand, friends and I captured conversations with these crop circle enthusiasts, looking for insights and explanations. Why do so many of the formations appear in southern England? Is there a connection between them and ancient sacred sites that dot the English landscape? What is the strange energy in the circles that affects electronic instruments? And what about the shapes? Do their complex geometric designs contain meanings or messages? Are they responding to the problems our planet now is facing? And could they hold some solutions? And the most puzzling question of all, what is the intelligence that's creating them? Although I don't have all the answers, I have come to understand that there's so much more to the phenomenon than surface observation reveals. These curious designs in corn may be powerful catalysts for change that could shift our perception of reality and help us to experience ourselves in a far greater world than we know now. The formation that brought crop circles to the attention of the world appeared in 1990 in Eastfield at Alton Barns in Wiltshire County. Dubbed a pictogram, it was more spectacular than anything anyone had witnessed before, and it captured worldwide attention. Up to this point, all the patterns had consisted of circular elements only, giving rise to them all being called crop circles. But this one contained a long broken line and a variety of unusual shapes, and was by far the largest formation ever.
I was not aware of the crop circle phenomena at all. And in 1990, a local farmer had a circle. And, you know, just joking, really, with my husband, said, hey, come on, you know, this isn't fair. Why come we haven't had one? It's sort of like keeping up with the Joneses, you know. And within a week, we had a crop circle. Within 24 hours, we were all across the world on the news.
One day, I was doing the ironing in the living room, and on the television, on the local news, was a strange pattern has appeared in the field in Wiltshire. I'd never been to Wiltshire in my life, and something about it, just seeing it on the screen, I've got to get there. Just like in Close Encounters, right? I've got to get there.
And they came in their thousands. We very naively put notices up on our fences saying, please view the crop circle from the opposite hill.
Ho, ho, ho,
Ho, ho, ho. Yes,
ho.
but we didn't know, did we? And they not only took the notice down, but they took the fence down that the notice was written on.
We went into this crop circle, a beautiful day, and there was Japanese in there and Americans, and we thought, God, I've never met a Japanese, I've never met an American. It was like, here we are in this middle of a field in the middle of nowhere, and we're having these fantastic conversations with people from all around the world.
And I walked into Eastfield and had an immediate sense of knowing that this was other. This was from elsewhere. If you are an architect or a designer, you know how everything is made. So I knew that in real terms, in terms of the real world as it is, this could not be made here. I mean, do you know one building job, a single building job, no matter how small, that has been finished on time with no mistakes? Oh, we need this junction. We'll get that tomorrow. We'll get it tomorrow. It's the wrong one. So they get it the following week. And then they've measured it wrong. You know, this is normal.
Its size and the new shapes were not the only things that fascinated me. Very strange things happened in that formation.
There were lots of odd things going on. HTV, who are a local TV production company from Bristol, they had a farming programme in those days, and they came and did some filming in it. And they got back to their studios and there was nothing on the film, just white light. That spooked them a bit because, you know, they were sort of experienced cameramen and they hadn't known anything like that happened before. You know, the radio mics you wear?
Yeah.
They wouldn't work inside the circle. And we stepped outside the circle, you know, just a yard outside, and they'd work. And you step back in, they wouldn't work.
I wanted to try and make a picture, and suddenly my camera went dead, all of a sudden, and I'm sure there are new batteries inside, so it's not my camera, it must be some kind of energy field in here.
Mine isn't the only one. A lot of camera malfunction in crop circles, and it is the electronic part that it gets affected, not the mechanical part. And it's that part that was sort of frazzled by the intensity of that formation. It was a very, very powerful formation. You call it a pillow.
We've had all sorts of malfunctions reported. Because my mother doesn't drive, I sort of drove her out to some crop circles, and we went to one of the large pictogram formations in Wiltshire. And my mum said, "Oh, can I borrow your phone to ring your dad and say, you know, hi from a crop circle?" So I gave her my phone, and within seconds she gave it back to me and said, "Oh, I can't get this thing to work." And because she's not particularly, you know, technologically minded, I took it from her and said, "Oh, yeah, let me use it." And I noticed there was no signal. And I jokingly at the time, because I was still partly sceptical, I said, "Oh, it's probably been zapped by the crop circle." And I went to the edge of the crop circle and literally went like this, and the signal on the phone went up to full signal strength. I brought it back in and it went down to no signal strength. And this sort of freaked me out at the time, because I could, you know, from a scientific background, I couldn't explain this. So, and it's like, the more sceptical you are, the more proof you want. So I went round the entire shape of the pictogram. There was no signal inside the formation, and yet going to arm's length outside, the phone worked perfectly.
With the crop circles, the energy just isn't at land level, it's above as well. So that when you fly over a formation that is what I call a powerful formation, you will find that instruments are certainly affected. A friend of mine who flies a helicopter, he will not go right over a crop circle, he'll always go round, because it does affect his instruments.
The first time you go into a crop circle, if you have any sensitivity to energy, you immediately feel the energy. You feel it actually like dowsing, you feel it 20 feet before you're in the crop circle.
And it can be measured, we know, by electrostatic voltmeters and magnetometers and various kinds of equipment. But people also, even without any of those instruments, they can just feel a change of energy as soon as they step in the crop circle.
That is so gorgeous. You look at that and you think, what on earth made that? These are beautiful, though, really are.
And there's a certain aesthetic quality to many of them which is just outrageous.
When you see a crop circle, there is a beauty in that formation, and it does something to us, and we gasp in wonder.
Since the pictograms arrived in 1990, this phenomenon has become an art form that's been recognised all over the world.
Call it an installation art event. It's a label that we use to describe a piece of work that people can walk around in is installation art. You walk into a field, you meet someone, and within 10 seconds you could be talking about anything from the fairy kingdom to modern artists to the collective unconscious, UFOs, power stations from the future leaving imprints, and it was just like, wow. I mean, what was the winner of the Turner Prize in London, our Modern Art Prize last year? It was a room you went into with a light bulb that went on and off. Very profound.
We've got this breathtaking beauty, and it comes down on call every summer. This is phenomenon A. Phenomenon B is that the world can ignore it.
I know, yeah.
Crop circles don't play a big role in the country here.
People here in this county, most people have never seen a crop circle.
Too few people know about them, too few people have seen one, too few people have taken an interest.
It is bizarre and it's staggering that such an overt and obvious and big phenomenon is largely ignored. And when it is given attention, it's given ridiculous attention. It's embarrassing, you know, to see some of these articles in newspapers.
My mother she got very interested in them as well. And we brought my father to have a look at them. And he was like, he hated them, he detested them. It wasn't just they're rubbish. He had this like awful hatred of them. He didn't like my mother being involved with them. So this was like, say, on a weekend. On the Monday, my mother went home, went to a solicitor and started divorce proceedings.
So what happened? There was worldwide excitement in 1990, and now there's little interest in crop circles. Why are they no longer a sensation?
My name's Doug. And his name's Dave. We're going out tonight in the fields to have a rave. Well, my name's Doug. And his name's Dave.
Some say it's hedgehogs trampling in the corn.
Some say it's wind after a nasty storm.
Some say it's aliens coming in the night.
If I saw one, Doug, I'd have a hell of a fright.
Some say it's artists messing around,
Making pretty patterns on the ground.
but we know the answer.
We'll take it to our grave.
Listen, you lot, it's only Doug and Dave.
How interesting it is that still in the U.S., when you say crop circles, oh, that got proved long ago.
Those two old guys.
Two guys did it.
That's
That'd be
right.
ridiculous.
Those
you know?
two old guys with a bit of strength, yeah.
The Doug and Dave story in the newspapers was put out by a press agency called MBF Services. Now, when some earlier researchers tried to track down who MBF Services were, it turned out there is no such press agency called that.
Track the address and everything, it was something to do with the Ministry of Defence. All the premises were owned by the Ministry of Defence, and the whole thing did look suspiciously well organised and suspiciously like a cover-up. These people appeared from nowhere and disappeared into nowhere.
I'm Dave Chorley, this is Doug Barr, and we are the two people that have created the crop circles in 1978 through to today.
I remember at the time when the story came out, it appeared all over the world press, very, very well organised press release.
We're the instigators of the patterns. We're the ones that designed them, we're the ones that's done them, and we're the ones that have finished with them.
It was a very, very, very effective, I think, a very, very effective piece of disinformation.
Certainly, the whole Doug and Dave story seems very contrived. It's almost like was perfectly created to take people's attention away from what was going on.
I went to see Doug when he gave a talk in Marlborough, and after their talk, we asked them some questions. And I actually asked Doug point blank, which formations did you make in Wiltshire? And he said, oh, we never made any formations in Wiltshire. And I said, hang on a minute, there's a room full of people here. You're actually saying, on film, you never made a single formation in Wiltshire. No, we definitely didn't make any formations in Wiltshire.
And Wiltshire's the place where most of the formations occur.
I mean, the Doug and Dave thing's crazy because they said they've been making them for 13 years. Well, we know from archive evidence that crop circles go back decades before, I mean, even hundreds of years.
So did Doug and Dave know geometry?
No, I don't believe they did. It was something they didn't understand. They were just country boys who were just out Saturday night to make a crop circle by the simplest means possible.
Being a computer programmer, I've written my own software to do the analysis, and they would have to be, you know, if they could do it that accurately, then why aren't they, you know, lecturers at Oxford University or somewhere in mathematics?
Unfortunately, hoaxing is no longer limited to Doug and Dave. The first to follow in their footsteps were men from London who were called Team Satan.
I think any really nice formation will always have the people who want to tell you it's man-made. I think Team Satan, there was an article about them in one magazine, and they implied they have made the magnetic fields formation because they included a description of how you would go about making it. Now, not only was it wrong, when you actually work out that you couldn't have made the formation in the way they say, but just by having said, oh, well, this is how you go about it, the implication is they made it, but in fact, there's no claim there at all.
Doug and Dave were caught lying very, very quickly, but these guys from London are really, they're pros. So who pays them? I wonder. I know why it's done, of course, to spread confusion, because governments, armies, church does not want this out in the world, because it changes the world, it changes humanity.
It seems to be a part of a structured mis- or disinformation campaign to keep the populations of the world as stupid or ignorant as possible and dependent on the current system, the current paradigm, which is clearly killing us and killing the planet.
You know, if someone says to you, oh, you know, that was a hoax, you think, oh, good, I don't have to think about it now. Because when you really think about what's happening,
It's momentous. It is huge.
There's an internal struggle, I think, with people as to how far their belief envelopes can stretch. And I think internally, when an easy explanation is offered, like the hoax, they can't but help themselves be drawn towards it because it lets them off the hook. In terms of like, oh, I can drop all this talk of consciousness and aliens and all the implications I've got to consider, and I think they run for safety within themselves.
The worst thing for an American, from his own point of view, is to be conned, to be duped.
If 100% were absolutely all totally hoaxed, I want to meet those humans because I think they're absolutely marvelous artists. They win, they get the Nobel Prize. Of course, I always wonder what their budget is and who would be paying for them, and so there's a lot of questions to, even if it were 100% hoaxed, wow, what an organization.
Do you have any sense of what would remotely make sense that any auspice would be going out and faking all these things?
That there's no explanation of the motivation of these people year upon year to be going out there making all of these formations for no money, no recognition. And yes, there are man-made formations, but the totality of it is such that there has to be something bigger at work here.
35 formations appeared on one night around the country. And I thought, well, there's no way that you could coordinate this sort of thing.
So how might people tell the difference between human-made formations and those made by something else?
If you're going to manually knock down a piece of crop, you are going to leave these markings on the stems.
It wants to bend on that because that's mechanical damage.
Now, let me show you one example of a formation that it shows no signs of this kind of stuff at all. This formation here at Alton Barnes was phenomenal inside. It was beautiful. There was not a damaged stem in there. You look inside and you realize, joy of joys, yes, there's a phenomenon. They're not all man-made. You only need to know that some are not man-made. And that's what this work reveals. You've got to look at the evidence. And you can see here some of the beautiful flows and absolutely gorgeous centers. And it really flowed in a completely different way to anything you'll see in some of the commercially made formations made for TV programs or whatever.
And the object of my shooting this is to show the difference between the lay of a human-made formation and how it is when something mysterious makes them.
Young crop, when it's still green, has what they call a bloom, which is sort of like a film on each stem. And you only have to touch it or brush it and it leaves a mark. And so one of the things that, you know, I would go in and look at would be, is the bloom disturbed? And are the stems crushed? Are they broken? And I would look at the nodal points on the plants because Levengood's work in America suggested that this force, he believes, makes crop circles somehow affects the nodal points. They can either be what he calls blown nodes, which is where the nodes are exploded from the inside out, or they can bend, elongate and bend. So I was very much into looking at all of that.
Science can help us identify elements in crop circles that can't be made by people, like bent nodes that are distributed in a pattern, where node length is longest in the center of the formation and gradually decreases in size as the grain gets further from the center. But there are things about crop circles that are outside the realm of science.
In science, if you haven't built a machine to measure it, then it doesn't exist.
Yes.
This is not just a three-dimensional phenomenon. It is actually involving other frequencies, other realms, other dimensions. And so we can't put that under a microscope.
So we have this anomaly with the crop circles where it gives the impression of something impinging in and manifesting. So we think that we should be objectively be able to pin this thing down into our realm. But all you can say that the crop circles do is that you can't pin it down. And so I feel that you're going to drive yourself insane trying to prove the crop circle phenomenon. All you can do is prove that it's truly anomalous.
The scientific method, which has come to dominate the epistemology in the West, is one way of knowing. It's a way of knowing that relies very much on experiment, on controlling parts of reality, on being able to repeat what you've been doing, testing a hypothesis.
What is called science equals skepticism, in a sense. Whereas scientia is supposed to be knowledge, but it means total pig ignorance as far as anything humanly important is concerned.
A huge, priceless gift that I've got.
Okay.
I did not have a scientific education.
Ah.
The knowledge we want to have is a bit more what's called gnosis, which is the Greek word for knowledge, right? Greek word for knowledge, which means your inner being, how your inner being responds and corresponds with what is out there.
We are getting an increasing awareness of events which deny Newtonian physical reality.
Newton, he said, this science that I show it to you, that's something that's outside of me. It's just there, it's in reality. This pen, if I let it go, it will fall, even if I don't look. And after Newton employed his rules, he got two groups of people. And one group was the really science group, the hard science, that were doing all the measurements and all the things. And the other group would be the ones that would be much more interested in what's going on in your mind.
We were divided. You know, matter was divided from spirit. Religion and science became two separate parts, but it went a lot deeper than that, didn't it? It was heart and mind that became separate, and everything became just torn apart from each other.
And it took until Einstein to realize that that's not true. And in fact, what Einstein was saying is there's some kind of connection between the experiment, the observer, and the object observed.
And then quantum physics came along, and they said, it goes further than that, Einstein.
In quantum physics, what happens is that a certain particle can be a particle or can be a wave, depending on how you look at it.
By watching our experiments, we influence the outcome of the experiments. So this blows you away, really, when you think about it.
It started with this Newton guy, and he went there. And then the other guys, who were much more interested in spirituality, they went the opposite way. Now, they went this way, he went that way. And so after Newton and Einstein and quantum physics and superstrings, we now have this situation. That we are approaching the same point, we are getting to the same things, only we come from complete opposite directions.
It's very fascinating now that the scientific pioneers are actually becoming more mystics, and something new is happening. It's great to see with chaos theory and with quantum physics that the language that they're beginning to incorporate, the voice that they're expressing their discoveries in, is very similar to this more holistic approach. So that's why maybe we're ready to also go back and see how ancients were viewing their world and incorporate that.
There's some very good books out now about the ancients having other senses that we've lost, and how much wisdom they had about number and proportion and the building of temples, circles, Stonehenge, etc.
So in Europe in the Middle Ages, there were the witch hunts where people would, we went out there and we found the people who had the plant teacher knowledge and had kind of direct visionary experience and burned them at the stake. And then when we started colonialism, we would find indigenous wisdom traditions and basically try to root them out. So we destroyed all the books of the Maya. So it's almost like we became obsessed and possessed with this one form of awareness, this one form of consciousness.
It's our task to bring the old spirit to modern life.
And the ancients knew the ineffable that can't be quantified is just as real as something you measure.
Hundreds of stone circles, which hold mysteries we have yet to unlock, are scattered throughout the British Isles. They are remnants of ancient cultures that held sacred ceremonies in this beautiful countryside. Could crop circles have been appearing as far back as when stone circles were created?
ripened fields are here again, a canvas for the weaver. A magic stirs throughout the land, and hope is in our hearts. The messenger has come again, the signs once more are here. As daytime sleeps, the weaver wakes to weave upon the ground.
You see, I feel very strongly that these formations came a long time ago. A long time ago. A lot of these formations are exactly the same size as many of the stone circles. I mean, within the centimetre.
So
what came first?
Yeah, what came first?
Were there symbols that came in the land?
We had times in the past where crop circles showed up and they disappeared again for a while and they showed up again.
Or maybe they've always been here, but we never really were paying attention. So you can read the history of crop circles and you can kind of think, well, yeah, there was these ones that were reported in 1700 and something and whatever, and there was these ones that were reported during the war.
Over the years, I've met so many people who've said, I remember these things when I was a little girl and we used to play in them.
When you do talk to the old farmers, they did have just simple circles.
Yeah, and they called them fairy rings.
Yeah. Then there were these kind of flattened areas in the fields where they said, okay, it must have been the work of the devil or it must be something supernatural. There is this report from 1880 published in the Nature magazine where there is James Rand Caproon reporting on, he called it storm effects, and he describes a field flattened into circles.
The storms about this part of Surrey have been lately local and violent, and the effects produced, in some instances, curious. Visiting a neighbour's farm on Wednesday evening the 21st, we found a field of standing wheat considerably knocked about, not as an entirety, but in patches, forming, as viewed from a distance, circular spots. Examined more closely, these all presented much the same character. A few standing stalks as a centre, some prostrate stalks with their heads arranged pretty evenly in a direction forming a circle round the centre, and outside these a circular wall of stalks which had not suffered.
If you have been in the Milk Hill Formation or in Triple Julia set, what you saw on the ground was a field filled with circles and you couldn't make up an order to it.
We've had crop circles for over 30 years in over 40 countries in the world.
They are a truly global phenomenon, and they always have been, and right from the beginning they were appearing all over the world.
Although crop circles have been reported in some 40 countries, in just about every form of vegetation, the vast majority of them, as many as 300 a year, have appeared in southern England. Why here? Why England? Why southern England? And why particularly this little area?
All of Wiltshire is essentially a landscape temple. We've got white horses, now we've got crop circles, we've got great sites. There's something about this area, with Stonehenge itself dated back to at least 8,000 BC carbon dated. Not what you see in the physical stones, but in wooden pillars that they've now identified.
These stones are not here because it's a nice place. They're here because of this power here. And it's going that way or it's going that way. But it was energy.
Ancient man knew where the power points were.
There's a reason ancient people built Stonehenge, Avebury, Silbury Hill, the Tor, all these man-made monuments in this section of the world. There's certain sections that I think are major earth energies. And I think the crop circles are the same thing. I think they picked the bullseye spot.
The crop circles were simply an extension of the magic that exists in stone circles. The two are identical in a funny way. They're both formal manifestations of basic geometric, harmonic and cosmic truths.
The most successful areas of research in crop formations are undoubtedly geometry and mathematics, and they're yielding the biggest results and the most promising, exciting lead, in a sense. And there's something about that, because it's about the unfolding of the mathematical or geometrical structure within creation.
I think Nick Collestrom's recently pointed out that some of these simple formations he's been working on are solutions to geometrical problems that no one has seen before. And Nick said that's very, very, very important. And this is what Gerald Hawkins picked up early on as well, that the designs in themselves solve Euclidean problems in an entirely new way.
It's interesting, Alan Brown's done some work on the quintuplet formations now, where you've got a circle in the middle and four little circles outside, and realised that each one squares the circle, and they contain actually a lot of geometrical information, easily as complex as some of the more busy-looking formations of later years.
His work on analysing the geometry of just the really simple early formations is just mind-blowing, because, you know, it really does illustrate that right from the beginning there was a level of sophistication to this of which we've had no idea at all.
This system of the quintuplet actually enables you to provide solutions to squaring the circle, most of which have never ever been seen before. These are all the ones that I've studied.
Right.
And these are, each one of them providing a squared circle solutions.
Squaring the circle is an exercise in drawing which attempts, without measurement, simply by the use of geometry, to produce a square whose perimeter equals the circumference of the circle.
The whole power of the squaring of the circle was never its function as a mathematical tool, it was its symbolic nature.
For the sacred geometer, the problem was never really about finding an absolute solution. It was the unification of the square, which was symbolic of the material, the earthly, and the circle, which was symbolic of the spiritual.
So once you reconcile and equal the perimeter with the circumference, you've symbolized a true marriage of earth with heaven, of the mechanical with the spiritual.
As the temple was seen as a place where heaven and earth were brought together, the spiritual and the material, the squared circle was often used as a template for the layout of places of worship. And we can find this from the structure of the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, Hindu temple layout, often Gothic cathedrals. These sort of structures, Florentine, Byzantium building, were using this idea to imbue the physical structure with a symbolic nature.
If you trail through all the literature available, I reckon you pull half a dozen examples of squaring the circle. And look, I mean, I've now 50.
Oh my God, all different.
All different. But I just want to show how I see this working. There's the silhouette of the formation. If you put a square around these satellites, the circle that runs through the centre of the satellite would be an exact squared circle relationship to that. But then that left this thing of, well, what's the function of the mother circle? And it was only then that, I mean, after working through many examples, that I realised that the whole thing was actually showing you a geometric sequence of how to back engineer a squared circle starting from a simple circle, and this is how it works. Each case, you begin with a circle. If you construct a pentagram within it and have the circle contained by that, that's your mother circle. If you then took another pentagram within that mother circle, then you put a pentagon inside that, that gives you this circle. You then take that inner derived satellite circle and you move it out so its centre sits on your original circle. And once you've done that, that gives you the exact size and position away from the mother circle to construct the square circle. You know, when I sit and think about it, I mean, that whole concept of encoded geometrical designs in wheat fields, I mean, it's just so far out there.
Something else that's far out is the appearance of balls of light that sometimes are seen skimming over fields before formations have appeared, making us all wonder if there's a connection between the lights and the circles.
My experience last year in Kent was very profound, that it was unmistakable in my mind as to what I was observing. It certainly wasn't a weather balloon, it certainly wasn't an aeroplane or a helicopter or anything like that. There it was. And it just kind of, you know, at moments it would shine like a brilliant star, in, you know, like Venus in the mornings, you know. Amazing, you know, incredible. Just moving about from left to right, then stopping, then starting again, stopping, and then eventually this thing moved and just hovered right above my head almost, you know, a few hundred feet up, but, you know, literally right above me. And again, it's kind of like almost as if it sort of winked at me, you know, just blinking on and off again, like the light flashing. 7 o'clock the following morning, bang, this boxy crop circle. And where that ball of light was heading in its direction was directly over the boxy field.
A lot of balls of light that are spotted right before crop circles appear.
That's correct. And here's another example, really. This one at Boxley, this technically, a lot of this crop here wasn't really flattened. You know, you can see, I mean, it was almost as if where it's been rotated, you could tell the crop wasn't flattened on the ground.
Yeah, and if rollers and boards
would have used, it would be flat.
Down
oh
flat,
yeah, it would be flat. You can be certain of that. You know, it would be flat.
Let's look at Zev's reconstruction
of this one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the boxy. There we are. This is Zev's reconstruction of this one. Again, I think it's 50 odd moves, but again, you've got to start from the circle, and then he kind of there's a triangle, and then he sort of, you know, starts to draw more circles around where the triangles. You've got the sort of flower of life thing coming through there.
And this is all done with compass and straight edge?
Yep, this is it. Compasses and straight edge. Yeah, basic tools of geometry.
Each step has to be taken or else you won't end up with it.
Yes, right.
And we don't have any technology whereby from somewhere above we've already got this design and we can beam it down like some kind of overhead projection, you know, and then everybody can go color things in. No way, it doesn't work that way. You have to build this from scratch.
Yes,
so who goes into a field and all of a sudden makes this thing whole cloth, you have to construct it. How do your lines relate? But then you have to erase them to give you the formation. Well, you can't do that in wheat.
And then eventually that shape then, obviously, has now come out of that from 47 to 48, leaving out everything not visible within the first. But there we are, and then there's your finished shape. But, you know, very complex, extremely complex. This is almost rocket science, you know, I mean, it's not far away.
You do really get the sense that there's a very, very, very original lateral mind behind this. Who or what or where that is really unclear.
Although we know nothing about the source of the mind behind the designs, one of the things I find most astonishing about the crop circle phenomenon is the relationship between the human psyche and circle activity. Through the years, many people have had circles materialize after they speculated on a likely field for a circle to appear. or when they meditated on what shape they wanted to see. A good example is when a group of Japanese tourists did a meditation asking for a recognizable shape. And that night, this origami-like formation appeared.
You know, during the year, I work with a group of people and we actually go out onto the land and the landscape. And the interesting thing is that the crop circles come where we've been.
Ah, how interesting.
Now, that's not saying we created them, but there's an interaction with us and whoever or whatever is creating that.
I'm certainly drawn towards the psychic interaction nature of it because of the work that we did. In 1995, we thought we'd do an experiment where we weren't trying to prove anything, particularly to the outside world, but we'd capitalise on what we had learned, which was that there was an interactive quality to the work we were doing. The more we gave towards the crop circles, the more came back. So we thought, well, let's put that to the test. We gathered up on top of a place called Woolstonbury Hill in West Sussex, and we concentrated on like visualising a crop formation appearing, which other groups had tried before with success. We had a particular shape we thought might arise. Lo and behold, that very night, exactly that shape that we had visualised turned up in the fields as a crop formation.
It's very, very mysterious. Yeah, people almost getting crop circles that are for them.
You have sung for your supper. You were so articulate.
When I eventually set foot in a crop circle, I had this incredible experience. It was a very spiritual experience. And I think it was from that moment that I knew I was going to have to be a messenger for the crop circles. So when I went home...
This was in the States,
This
yes?
was in California. Anyway, this one morning, I went to my kitchen window and looked out of there, and about 6 feet away from the kitchen window was this incredible little crop circle. It was about 4 feet in diameter, anti-clockwise lay, beautiful crisp edges and standing stalks in the center. And
Did the public ever find out about that one, or was
the
that
public?
Just, yeah. They didn't invade your backyard or something?
Oh no. Well, I live in the country and I live out, you know,
So
way
just
out
for
of
you,
town. It was just for me. I know that's why I didn't take a photo of it, because it was a very, very personal gift.
So what in the world could be the explanation for this awesome phenomenon?
The first time when I walked into a circle, it wasn't so much I had this great spiritual thing. It was like, oh my God, what has the power to do this?
People throw out the idea that these patterns occur in nature, therefore they could be the reason behind the crop circles. I would imagine a tornado or a whirlwind could put down a simple swirled circle, but anything more sophisticated than that, it has to show intent. There's no reason why nature would replicate a pattern like that through natural processes. It's clear to me that there is a designer, whoever that may be, behind the shapes.
When it began to evolve into the more complex designs and the pictograms, maybe that's where you see something learning to utilize this natural force and turning it into something that can create complex patterns. So it may be using some force that already existed in nature. Now, you're back to this thing of
why
and what makes them.
Why sit down? What's behind it all?
Why? It's a question that I find tantalizing. What's the purpose or the reason behind this phenomenon? Is an intelligence attempting to tell us something?
I think it's a message from the other side to encourage us, because it includes so many signs that people have used in the past, and that not only our scientists now recognize, but that, for instance, the Red Indians in America recognize.
When I took some photographs to the Hopi elders, it meant something to them.
What do they read in the symbols?
It's more than anything else, I think they read warning signs.
Yeah.
And their whole take on our modern civilization is that we have gone out of balance or out of sync with the natural process of life.
Here in the Western world, everything is screened, is tidied up, is behind another screen of some sort, television or whatever, and you're just sitting back, not experiencing life at all, in fact, observing life flowing by. And there's a huge difference there. So we've been cut off from all those senses. And that has reduced people's appreciation or natural understanding of the open spaces and of nature. And the difficulty is that once you lose your link with nature, you've actually lost your link with God.
Our technology has gone above our maturity. We have a technology and not the maturity to handle it.
I don't think Westerners fully understand the seriousness of the mess they've got into and the way in which time is passing them by.
All this area of Wiltshire and Salisbury Plain. There are military exercising here from all over the world, and they have shells that cost £30,000, that's about $50,000 kind of thing, that they just fire off just for the sake of it. I mean, they rattle the windows. And you stand on this site here, which is both the divine and the ridiculous. And that's duality for you. So you've got on the surface, in perfect duality, the temple, the spiritual, and under the surface, the exact demonic opposite.
We are in a crisis. Yes. And in an international crisis this time. You can't run away from it. There is nowhere to run.
We have this ecological crisis, and things are getting more and more threatening. You know, that we really may not make it as a species. We're looking at a situation now where 25% of all species could be extinct in 30 years, and the oceans are 90% fished out of large fish, and huge chains of ocean life are disappearing. The acceleration of climate change has increased to the point where the global ice caps could melt, which would lead to 10 to 20 meters sea level rise, potentially in like 2 or 3 years.
In old ancient source texts all over the world, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or the ancient Vedic texts or Aborigines, oral traditions, they all talk about the end time, the late time, dark epoch, that kind of terms. And I believe we're right in the middle of it.
I think all these prophecies
can be changed.
Yes. And it's rather like they're just saying, if you don't wake up, this is likely to happen.
The test of these times is, will you empower yourself and find that divine spark within and look for all your answers within, and indeed find the universe within yourselves?
I think it's very important to get away from them and us and to start feeling that there's a greater wholeness to a collective consciousness than we have been able to consciously know.
Either we now recognize each other and work together and cooperate in our legislations, in our whole, how we build a new society, or we shall be in a much bigger catastrophe in about 10 years because we'll be running out of resources.
It seems like we're going to go through this kind of initiatory cataclysmic crisis for humanity, and potentially what comes out of that could be a compassion-based global civilization that is oriented towards psychic work and kind of soul, spirit, heart evolution. And another potential would be, Mad Max, for 1,000 years with slaves, and who knows.
What we're seeing is just an infinitely unfolding disaster going on. But that's not actually the only aspect of things. And the crop circles, I think, constitute one of the other aspects of things. There's something so immensely beautiful and elegant and so pristine about these things. It's one of the great counterbalancing virtues of our time.
The crop circles are fundamentally a very hopeful phenomenon. I think they show us that we are moving out of a very dark state into something new and something different.
The crop circles are helping slowly us to build a new way of thinking and feeling and connecting.
If the crop circles are here to help us develop a new way of thinking and feeling and connecting, how are they doing that? Is it a matter of deciphering their messages? Or does it involve something else?
Over years of experience in, around, and with the crop circles, it's like given me experiences of a nature which I would have never had before. Starting this silent circle facility is Primarily my attempt to put something back in, this is where people can come from across the world like they do and gather and meet and discuss and find out. Why is a cross-section of the global community coming here year on year? They seem to be affecting these people and many others at a real fundamental, deep level.
It opens us up to, I like to call it the mysterium tremendum. And it means the great mystery of the cosmos and the universe and human beings.
I witnessed an amazing event where there was an old lady that wanted to go to the formation, and her and her husband had driven from 100 miles away or somewhere. And she'd got terrible arthritis and she couldn't walk, and she was in a wheelchair. And myself and another person sort of carried this wheelchair down to the formation. I then, thought nothing of it. I went around doing my measuring and experimenting on things. And then I noticed there was a bit of commotion, and I turned round and there was all this sort of excitement. And this lady had got out of her wheelchair. And her husband was almost in tears because he said she hadn't walked for 20 years because she'd had this terrible arthritis.
It's a good thing you're a believable person, Mike.
And literally, she actually walked herself back up to the car, and just sort of carried, we carried the wheelchair back, and it was like, well, no other word really than a miracle to describe it.
Another lovely thing that happens, and has happened on several occasions, when I've been giving talks, lectures, people have actually been healed, and that has nothing whatsoever to do with what I'm saying, but it's to do with the frequencies that are given off by the shapes, because many of them are shaped like mandalas, which have the principles of sacred geometry inherent in them, and so it's how people's own personal frequencies are interacting with the frequencies that are bouncing off the crop circle pictures.
It's the geometry of the shapes, it's the geometry of the formations. When you look at them, something happens.
I would assume that the crop formations are in some way stretching out the mathematical programming possibilities on planet Earth, which might allow new areas of evolution which haven't been possible within the framework of what's programmed into the planet Earth sphere. In a way, there's a benign trickery going on here, because they make these things so fascinating that it attracts people into these things. And one of the things I've noticed has been that when I go into crop formations, and especially when I'm receptive, I feel changed when I come out, and I feel as if my cells have been slightly fried.
There's an energy involved that works on a very deep level with us, on a very deep unconscious level. It avoids mind. It goes straight to the heart, to the unconscious.
They are a temporary creation of sacred space in which we can move in and move out and experience almost a different reality.
Once you accept for yourself at a certain level that something here is real, you know, you accept that this is real, you have to reappraise your entire reality.
They're stretching our awareness of what reality is. Reality consists of so many different dimensions, different frequencies, different aspects. Reality is not just what can be validated by the physical sciences.
Everything we think about and talk about in relation to crop circles and UFOs, extraordinary experiences, occurs in the context of a worldview. Worldviews determine what we allow ourselves to perceive. They hold the psyche together. They're a kind of glue that links us to the tribe. We don't even know sometimes that we have a worldview because it's like the water the fish swims in or the air we breathe.
I grew up in apartheid South Africa. I know what it's like to exist in the goldfish bowl of the system and then move out of it and suddenly see it completely different.
Immediately we were born, they had a pair of tiny shackles that were fixed on us, you know? Feet, legs, hand, brains, eyes. You're here. This is planet Earth. This is the way we do things. And we're not having any of that nonsense about ghosts, fairies, premonitions. Yeah.
The scientific method is the dominant or official way of knowing at this time. In this worldview, the human is separated from nature. We objectify the other. We separate ourselves from whatever it is we're connecting with or studying or knowing, and it treats the earth as fundamentally a resource.
We take nourishment from the earth, and what we give back to the earth is kind of indigestible. Because a forest doesn't have much value sitting as a forest, but if you chop it down, make broad lumber out of it, then turn it into a toxic waste dump, then cover that over and make a parking lot out of it, you've made a number of profits, but you've decimated the environment. That's basically what we've been doing all over the planet.
It's a worldview of scarcity. Things are limited, so we have to fight over what there is.
For all this stuff to exist, we have to vote into the two twin dynamos which motivate our societies. Not enough to go around, us or them.
Our existing worldview and the way we think right now is failing us.
It fails in many ways. It doesn't tell us about our own inner life.
What are the most important things in our lives? Love, art, creativity, friendship. What in hell has that got to do with Dow Chemicals?
When the heightened dualism that occurs under nationalistic pressures or conflicts between powers, and the dualism of the mind gets more and more sharp and the polarizations become so severe that we threaten to destroy ourselves, the worldview of scientific materialism doesn't have much to offer at that point. It doesn't tell us about all the anomalous experiences that people are having that can't be explained.
We found anomalous substances, we found white powders and spongy substances, and we had them analyzed, and scientists said, we have no idea what they are. I have a little bit of the white spongy substance at home, and it grows. It grows. And my father, when he was still alive, he was a chemist, and he looked at it and he said, it can't grow, it can't be. Because he saw what it was made of, and I said, look, Dad, here are the photographs, from 1 month to the next, and he said, oh my God, this is not possible.
When an anomaly challenges the dominant worldview, as in the case of Galileo, the empire strikes back.
To stand up for entirely new and unfamiliar realities requires a lot of heroism.
It was only, 1620 that they put Galileo on house arrest?
Around that time, there were people like Giordano Bruno and Copernicus and Galileo who were going, hang on, maybe it isn't these spheres all nestled in. Perhaps the fixed stars aren't actually fixed to that outer sphere, that they are in fact deep space. And the thing is, they didn't have the proof of that either. The gravity hadn't been conceived of, so there was the lack of proof. What people say, yeah, okay, great idea, but if the Earth's flying around, why aren't we flying off the Earth? And they're going, well, I don't know, that is a problem, I admit there's a problem. They're going, well, see, you can't really explain it. But you couldn't conceive of the mechanism before the worldview had been conceived of. So we can't conceive of the veracity of this new worldview that's coming in, because We will only have the veracity of it once we've conceived of it in its more full thing.
The age of scientific materialism is waning. This new realm, this new perspective, new worldview is still unfolding.
What's going to happen?
Matter and spirit are coming back together again. They're merging again.
I had a very, very close connection with Steiner himself. What Rudolf Steiner had said at the beginning was, come the end of this century, the entire human phenomenon will simply cross into another dimension. He called it crossing into the spiritual world. We've already begun to see it in terms of particle physics, when certain physicists are becoming aware that the particles they're working with are consciously, not consciously, but in energy, aware of what they're doing and capable of responding. Steiner had no idea whatever what it would be like being in a physical body after the transformation into a new dimension that he prophesied would happen 75 years after his death.
I don't even like the term dimension so much. And I think that like a lot of our language is kind of old-fashioned, and we have to kind of go further and integrate, you know, some of the perceptions we get from physics. And I would think more of like you know, vibrational resonances or densities.
It's not a good word, you're absolutely right.
And it may be, you know, it may be the case that the planet is physically changing its level of material density, and that may manifest on the level of consciousness and the possibility of the psyche to transform, you know, the world in a very direct, shamanistic kind of way, and that may be powers that we're going to regain that we once had when the world was in a different order.
Those are tremendous powers we're talking about. If you can simply manifest anything into this dimension, into this world, into this reality, by thinking, by focusing, by the power of thought, the power of prayer. They used to be just a beautiful myth from the Bible, you know. It's not supposed to really happen in real life. Well, what if it does?
What if it does? The ramifications are enormous. It boggles my mind to think of the astonishing world that the crop circles appear to be ushering in. And is it rapidly descending upon us? Are we being prepared for contact? After 50 years of media mockery that the idea we're being visited, things are changing. Retired officials from government and the military have been coming forth with long-suppressed stories about experiences with UFOs. The British and French governments have released their classified files, and the Vatican has put its stamp of approval on the likelihood of visitation. Eyewitness reports are being discussed on mainstream talk shows, where they seriously consider the testimony and the evidence.
You know, maybe we have to take seriously the Mayan calendar and these other prophetic systems, and from that perspective, there's like a kind of accelerating speed up that's happening. And that's happening on all these different levels. So technologically and psychically, and then this evolutionary destruction that's happening, that's somehow like moving towards some kind of crescendo, which then leads us into another form or you know, kind of expression of human culture if we manage to survive whatever this threshold is.
With our future in the balance, in this rush of escalating energy, will we accept the circles as coming from elsewhere? And will we discover the source of the vast intelligence that designs them and delivers them to us?
I don't know. Nobody knows. But it's conscious, and it's not us.
Through the crop formations, we're coming into contact with intelligences which, to me, do not seem to be of this earth, and seem to be of a, for want of a better but inadequate word, dimension, which seems quite distant from us, even though they seem to have quite profound understandings of us.
My best guess, and it's no more than a guess, is that the crop circles are being manifested by a federation, by a collective of intelligences, civilizations.
You know, we like to travel. We like to go places. So I don't see why, if you were at a higher level of being in awareness, you'd want to like tour around the universe and see what was going on and interact, have fun with the locals.
Maybe we're dealing with some form of interdimensional intelligence
that has been through and experienced something like our Earth experience. They are coming back through the circles, through the information that they're bringing, to try to help us in this interdimensional shift that we're about to experience.
You know, I would say that it's a teaching on the nature of reality and the nature of consciousness that's geared for the modern Western psyche as we go through this accelerating transformation process, which very well may be keyed to 2012.
In July of 2008, the circle makers pointed us at 2012. They gave us a formation which shows the orbital relationships of the planets in our solar system in December of that year. At that time, the Mayan calendar ends, and something momentous has been foretold to occur.
They adore us. They have not a speck of ill feeling towards us. But I have had it drawn to my attention that their idea of the equivalent of a good Saturday night in front of the TV is shrieking with laughter at the way we conduct ourselves. I mean, we are the best soap opera available on Alpha Centauri.
And I'm sure they're scratching whatever passed for their heads.
And yes, and they're scratching whatever passed for their heads.
I think that there is a tremendous, not only psychological knowledge of human nature involved in the intelligence that's behind this, but a great compassion and beneficence.
Here is the sting in the tail, and this will drive us mad. They don't want anything. They're not selling anything.
So tell me, why are they not being more obvious?
They're not going to present themselves like, okay, here we are in our big motherships, you know, because it would scare the hell out of us, wouldn't it? I know a Swiss friend of mine, colleague, Werner Underhob, he once had an encounter with a gigantic cloud of light emanating, coming from a crop circle, rising from a crop circle, and he asked it to come closer, and it did. And by the time it got really close and he got scared, it backed off again, because they're so sweet and gentle.
They're teachers, and essentially they have a curriculum for us. The most important thing about the curriculum is the recognition that there is it's a kind of Zen thing.
Right.
You know, there's kind of like a teaching on the nature of consciousness and on the nature of reality on all these different levels. So, you know, that might be these other levels of more benevolent alien intelligence who are trying to give us clues so that we could move into this next level of consciousness positively.
It seems to me that the crop circle makers are teaching us experientially. How can I, if I was trying to teach you, say, I'm going to give you a revelation, here it is, truth is beauty, and you go, yeah, truth is beauty. You're not going to get it.
I think they're here to stimulate us by making us reach within ourselves for the answers.
They're being very gentle and thus presenting just little facts and giving away their data, their hints and their secrets, bit by bit.
We're being given an opportunity for a close encounter in our own safe territory, in a way that we can go back to the next day, photograph, measure, discuss at great length, have picnics in.
So what do you think is trying to teach us, actually? Just to open our minds?
I think the simplest teaching is, yes, to get us to stretch and open our minds and consider that there's so much more to reality than what most of us are aware of living here in this third-dimensional reality.
I think we are on a ladder. We're quite a way up this ladder, though we don't know it. The ladder won't culminate in contact, but at a level which will not be strange creatures coming out metallic clouds, you know, take me to your leader, you know. It will be at a level which causes to crumble everything which is a foundation stone to our society. I'd be very happy to see our religion, our economy, our politics crumble and to be replaced by a more benign, tolerable and, dare I say it, Christian view of the future.
I imagine it would probably have the same impact of the return of Christ or Muhammad. I mean, it would have that type of impact.
We would create a new set of myths. In these stories, wise people would put the beneficence, the beauty, the cooperation, the values that are being shown and taught through the circles. So positively, this could create a whole new mythology, a whole new, not religion so much as story of humanity and our relationship to the earth and to the cosmos.
So what about all of it? What does it all add up to?
I mean, one thing I would say is you cannot take crop circles in isolation. They're a tip of a multi-tip iceberg, and they connect up with UFOs, they connect up with psychic phenomena, and it's all bringing everyone to the same point, which is that there is some change imminent, that there is something around the corner which we're being called to prepare ourselves for. And nobody can tell you what it is, but all these things have brought them to an awareness that there's something bigger than our usual mundane lives.
Crop circles, in a way, are an expression of humanity moving out of their chaos into more order, of becoming more spiritual beings, and of raising their vibrations and moving in that next step of evolution.
So where would we be as more evolved people? Is the crop circle phenomenon going to unite us as one humanity in relation to other intelligent life? Will we become better stewards of the planet and we live in peace? And if anything has the technology to engage us from another dimension or another part of the universe, could it help us solve the great problems that confront us as we run out of resources and heat up the planet? Stay tuned. In the words of the late, great John Mack,
it is the most dramatic, the most extraordinary crossover from the other dimension in the history of the human race.
Circles that land in the fields in the night, circles that draw in the people of light, circles and fractals and centipedes too. Someone knows something, but you don't know